And it is time for the hot topic of the hour. Body cam footage shows the moment Ryan Routh was arrested on a Florida highway after opening fire at President Trump's West Palm Beach golf course. Routh was spotted by a witness after taking off down I-95, where he was promptly taken into custody. He was charged with 2 federal gun charges in court yesterday. Cops said that he camped outside the golf course for up to 12 hours before the former president actually showed up, and reportedly exploited a security breach around the course's perimeter, something that the New York Post says the Secret Service has known about for years. Authorities questioned if he acted alone.
Did he act alone? Did he have some kind of help?
At this point, we're still exploring that, investigating that. Our investigation will determine that. We do not have information that he's been acting with anyone else at present.
Meanwhile, President Biden says that he spoke to his predecessor, President Trump, about the shooting and said that when asked what's next for the Secret Service, he said this.
Do you have any more information on the assassination attempt?
I think thank God the president's okay. I think we got a full report so far. We're down there tonight. But one thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help. And I think the Congress should respond to their needs if they, in fact, need more services.
Congress will now consider boosting funding for the Secret Service, which both parties say could include attaching emergency funding to the bill, averting a government shutdown on September 30th. Joining me now is former FBI Special Agent, Fox News contributor Nicole Parker. Nicole, great to see you this morning. What's your reaction to all of this?
Well, first of all, I have many thoughts. I was watching that press conference that occurred yesterday, and, I would like to express my appreciation for law enforcement getting in there quickly and, beginning this investigation. Obviously, the FBI is taking the lead in the investigation. They are conducting search warrants of the vehicles, the electronic devices, social media posts. They are reviewing what we call CAST, our cellular analysis service team, which investigates the pings. Where was this individual at and what hours? It was determined that he had been outside of that golf course in that vicinity since about 1:30 in the morning, Sunday morning. How did he get there? He's just camping out and waiting for President Trump to arrive and golf? How did he know that President Trump was going to be golfing there? We know that was what, the Secret Service Director, acting Secret Service Director said was an off-record movement. So very few people knew that was even going to be occurring. But I think one thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, Maria, as a former FBI agent, is that when these incidents occur, there seems to be a pattern that the FBI did have note of who this individual was prior to, these incidents occurring. And I would like to take a moment and read exactly what the SAC of FBI Miami did say in that press conference, because I think it's important for viewers to understand. Sure. He said, quote, "He was the subject of a previously closed 2019 tip to the FBI where it was alleged that he was a felon in possession of a firearm. In following up on the tip, the alleged complainant was interviewed and did not verify, I repeat, did not verify, providing the initial information. The FBI passed that information to local law enforcement in Honolulu." Close quote. So here we are again. There's another awful incident that occurred. Thankfully, President Trump is alive. But this was actually on the FBI's radar back in 2019. And, the SAC of FBI Miami kind of slipped it in at the end of his portion of the press conference. Oh, by the way, this happened. And again, I would just like to make sure that the FBI is following up on those tips. And I would like them to look into that again. Was it really exhausted? Were all resources exhausted to make sure that they could not charge this individual back then? Because what's happening is he's being charged, was just charged yesterday, with probably the exact same crime that he would have been charged with if he had been charged back in 2019 when there was a tip that said that there was a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. Why was he not charged back in 2019? They're saying the complainant couldn't verify the information. I would want to make sure that they drilled down and did everything that they could before they handed that off to local law enforcement.
Well, I mean, these are all obvious and important questions, Nicole, and where are the answers? There are real concerns arising about this FBI lead agent in the Miami field office tasked with investigating this second assassination attempt, Nicole. And yesterday, when Governor DeSantis in Florida said he's doing his own investigation, a lot of people on X and on social media were telling him, look, don't give this up to the FBI. Don't share your information with the FBI. They're worried that we're not getting the truth from the FBI. You work there, Nicole. What can you tell us?
Maria, I can tell you that I understand Americans' concerns. Okay, I've said it over and over on your program, and I will always stand by the truth. There are amazing special agents at the FBI who are working tirelessly and want no involvement in politics. But the problem comes in when you have positions and people in high leadership positions who come in and use their, law enforcement powers to push their political agendas, or frankly, to let their own political views inhibit their ability to do unbiased investigations.
Yeah.
And what's happened is this SAC of Miami, who is a special agent in charge of the Miami division, had whistleblowers come forward and say, this is what occurred. And over, there's been a pattern of this particular SAC not exactly being a supporter of Trump, which is completely fine. He doesn't need to be a supporter of Trump, but you cannot be anti-Trump and be in a position of authority. And why would Christopher Wray promote someone to be in charge of the Miami division who has any question that they may have had a problem with Trump in the past or his views?
Right.
Now you're in charge of the AOR that oversees President Trump, and now you're in charge of an investigation investigating. This is why Americans don't trust the FBI, and it's very, very unfortunate.
And it's very difficult to trust the FBI after what we've witnessed. Hillary Clinton is out yesterday talking about how dangerous President Trump is. And of course, she started all of this back in 2015, 2016 with her Steele dossier and the Russia collusion lie, which the FBI pursued, and the story went viral. Here's Hillary yesterday. Watch this. It's quite rich.
I don't understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is. We can't go back and give this very dangerous man another chance to do harm to our country and the world.
Let's be clear. The only person that Trump is dangerous to is Hillary Clinton, because Trump knows what Hillary Clinton did in terms of coming up with this massive lie that he colluded with Russia, where the FBI and the CIA drove the story forward. It doesn't look like the FBI has changed very much since those days, Nicole.
Well, and again, I was an agent under, President Obama, under President Trump, and under President Biden. And I can tell you that when President Trump came into office, he did not instruct us to go after any of his political opponents. In fact, Hillary Clinton was never charged under President Trump's time. He did not come in and say, you know what, we're going to go back and charge her for using a personal server to send classified information. That did not happen. And so I think the problem lies in that in this administration under Biden, they come in and immediately it's like, okay, you know what, we're going to charge this. And it just seems that they're going after President Trump and those that support him. And it's just not right.
Well, it's not only not right, it's quite dangerous as we see the effects of it. Nicole, we'll keep following it, and we appreciate your insight. Thank you.